What's up guys, Lifting here. In this video I will cover my Brutus Lead Sprinkler Berserker build. I use Molten Strike for single target and Wild Strike for area clear. Also, this video is a supplementing element to the forum guide. Make sure to check that out if you're interested in the build. It covers some of the topics more in detail. With this build, you stack strength. Lots of strength. Why? Well, because it's fucking manly. But other than that, because with the way Lead Sprinkler works, the more strength you have, the more flat fire damage the weapon gains locally. This also comes with the welcoming side effect of granting us a ton of extra life to scale, as for every 2 strength increase, we gain 1 extra life point. Now this may not sound like much, but once you reach 800 to 1000 strength, that's 400 to 500 extra flat HP, which effectively increases the life scaling potential of the life nodes in the skill tree by quite a lot. The Berserker can reach some amazing damage numbers as compared to the other ascendancies. That said, I also believe the Chieftain Ascendancy to be an excellent choice, and potentially even the Ascendant or the Scion. So let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the build so you don't go in expecting it to be something it's not. Let's start with the cons or downsides of the build. And the first thing is that even with a rather high health pool, playing as the Berserker can at times feel a bit glass cannon-y. This is in due part to Aspect of Carnage that makes us take increasing amounts of damage, and the Rite of Ruin and Rage mechanics, which adds a powerful life degen effect that needs to be countered with our life regen. This however means that all that life regen we have is mostly going to solve that issue. Fortunately though, 50 rage stacks, even with Rite of Ruin, is completely sustainable with this setup, and we even still regenerate life. When activating Blood Rage, however, I notice a slight degen happening. But considering all the leech and life gain on hit we receive with this setup, it really isn't an issue. I've hardly noticed it. Secondly, while we can destroy Argus and Disaro easily, I don't think this setup is particularly good as an Uberlap farmer. The Carnage cluster will make us take extra damage from traps, and the Rite of Ruin compromises our life regen. For Uberlap farming, you'll want the complete opposite. That's not to say you can't farm Uberlap on this. I've probably done around 50 Uberlap runs with it, and it wasn't bad at all. The Warbringer Warcry node works as an effective health flask that never empties, and if you really want to farm Uberlap on this build, it is as simple as speccing out of the Rage Ascendancies and spend it on Pain Reaver and Cloaked in Savagery instead. It would probably actually make it a pretty good lap farmer. Another concern you might have is the budget requirement. It's no secret that this build eventually ends up using some rather expensive endgame items, including items such as the Lyco Shield, Soph's Blood, Watcher's Eye Amulet, and a 3+ Molten Strike projectiles, Enchanted Helm. There is a very big difference between recommended items and necessary items. None of the ones I just mentioned are necessary for the build to function and to perform well. Until you can afford some of these unique items, you can easily get by with proper rare items in their place. Good life, strength, resist, and potentially a damage roll rare item is going to be more than enough to carry you. Honestly, you probably won't even feel that much of a difference until you start doing Guardians and Shaper. And I'm pretty confident that if you have the Lyco Shield and proper rare gear and know what you're doing, then you can deal with the Guardians and the Shaper. All of the other uniques are great, but they're hardly necessary. So the message to take home is that you do not need to be swimming in currency to play this build. As long as you can buy your Brutus Lead Sprinkler and a couple of Wildfire Jewels, which totals probably less than 5 chaos, then you can begin this build and farm up the currency as you progress throughout the game. Remember, I started this build as my league starter, meaning I had 0 currency. And if I could, then so can you, of course. Now I'll share an extra Path of Building paste bin with an example of a budget version of this character. So you can check out the rare gear, what that means and so forth. Alright, so now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about the strengths of the build. So first of all, the build is very easy to level. I really like that about it. You can use the lead sprinkler already from level 28 and cruise from there on. And if you aren't completely certain on how to level it, I'd advise you to check out the forum guide. I have detailed leveling instructions there. And although it's nice to level and all that stuff and the lead sprinkler is cheap, the main selling point of this build is its damage, especially the single target damage. Most endgame boss fights become a trivializing matter. An example of this is the Shaper fight and the vortexes that can end up filling the ground. Because our single target damage is so high, we can kill him before this ever becomes a pressing issue. And with all the hits that Molten Strike delivers, the build also makes good use of either 1 or 2 Elder Rings and potentially a Watcher's Eye to gain up to 40 to 70 life gained for each enemy hit by attacks, making us regain our life incredibly fast, ultimately making many encounters pre-tier 16 maps face tankable. So while the single target damage is the highlight of the build, the area clear potential with Wild Strike is not to be underestimated either. I originally feared that the damage would be underwhelming, considering it's only in a 4-link. I have tested it in any tier map with super tanky mods, and it works great regardless of those. So that with the strengths, let's talk about the skill gems now. For single target, Molten Strike is linked with Multi-Strike, Concentrated Effect, Elemental Focus, Elemental Damage with attacks, and Fire Penetration as the 6th link. For area clear, Wild Strike is linked with Ancestral Call, Multi-Strike, and Elemental Damage with attacks. I use Shield Charge for mobility, linked to faster attacks, Fortify, and Calling Strike. This provides me with extra defense and the ability to call an enemy, obviously. However, the main reason for Calling Strike is that it gains up to 10% increased attack speed with 20 quality on it, making us shield charge faster. My auras are Anger for a pretty significant damage boost and Vitality to help counter the Rage degen, as well as to provide me with life gain on hit via the Watcher's Eye Jewel. If you prefer, you can use Herald of Ash until you get your Watcher's Eye Jewel, as it makes area clear better early on. I also use a cast when damage taken, Immortal Call, Stone Golem, and Elemental Weakness setup. If you prefer, you can use a Lightning Golem for more attack speed. However, the life regen from the Golem is useful for countering the degen, especially early on. Finally, I use Enduring Cry, which works great together with the Warbringer Ascendancy. I've linked it to increase duration as it prolongs the healing effect. And with the Warbringer Ascendancy reducing the cooldown, you can pretty much have the healing effect of Enduring Cry running permanently if you want. It is because of the Warbringer Ascendancy and Enduring Cry that I can get away with not having any health flasks in my setup. This means more utility flasks, which in turn means more damage or more defense. Oh, and I also have Blood Rage in this setup, as it benefits from increased duration. Now let's talk Ascendancies. I think there are 3 great choices for this build: the Berserker, Chieftain, or the Ascendant. Of any of these, the Berserker is the one that has the highest damage output. The aspect of Carnage plus Rite of Ruin Rage effect is just too good. It comes with the downside of being less tanky than the other Ascendancies though. Because of the Rage effect and its bonus to attack speed and movement speed, it is also partly why it becomes a great map clear build, because you get some powerful bonuses to your mobility. Now the Chieftain is the tankiest and probably the most balanced choice of them all, with easy endurance charge generation, very high life regen potential, fire life leech, extra strength scaling, inbuilt avatar fire, and 10% S on attack, making Soft Blood redundant. Instead you can save a ton of currency and get yourself a great rare amulet. The Chieftain is a great choice and has amazing Uberlap farming potential, and while it has less damage than the Berserker, it still has more than enough for something like the Shaper once properly geared. Finally, the Ascendant. This one is actually a really interesting choice too. The combination of the Ass Zerker and the Ass Champion provides some pretty serious damage by being able to utilize Rage, Intimidate, and Taunt multipliers. Also, the chance to fortify on melee hit is nice too. While it's true that the secondary effects of Wild Strike and Molten Strike doesn't count as melee and thus won't help proc it, the primary attack does, and it should be sufficient to keep it up reliably. The more I look at the Ascendant, the more I like it. But if you want the maximum amount of damage, then the Berserker is still the go-to choice. Now, I know I'll get asked this, so I'll real quick tell you why I don't think the Juggernaut, Champion and Deadeye is a good choice for this setup. The issue with the Champion is mostly that this Ascendancy doesn't really provide anything we can't get via other classes or gear, except for Perma Fortify, but yeah. For example, the 100% hit chance via Taunt that allows us to not use Resolute Technique is in general pretty good, right? However, in this case, the Lyco Shield will provide us with 100% hit chance anyway, which makes that Ascendancy much less appealing. Even with the Taunt, Adrenaline and Intimidate buffs, it still deals significantly less damage than the Berserker. People then proceed to make the argument that with the Champion you can dual wield and have a powerful stat stick, which is true and great for many builds, but for this setup it would be terrible, as it would make our character alternate between the Brutus Lead Sprinkler and the offhand weapon when using both Molten Strike and Wild Strike, which ultimately would decrease the damage output by a huge amount since all the damage we scale comes locally from the Lead Sprinkler. As for the Juggernaut, the issue here is that the Unyielding Ascendancy, which otherwise is pretty great, also grants 5% increased area of effect per endurance charge. Ironically, this is not good. With Molten Strike you'll want as little area of effect as possible. It's true that the ball overlap effect is slightly increased, but unfortunately it also makes the projectiles travel further apart. This leads to a reduced effect of the damage multiplier from point blank, and also resulting in that fewer projectiles will hit the same target effectively, leading to a DPS loss. It's for the same reason I don't think the Deadeye is a great choice either, not unless you skip endless munitions. But like the Jug, those Ascendancy points are very much what makes them appealing as choices, in my opinion at least. In this case, it just isn't so. It's unfortunate because the life gain on hit from the Deadeye and the +1 to projectile from endless munitions is pretty damn good, and I could definitely see some kind of crit potential here, however, not with this type of setup. So let's take a look at the skill tree real quick. Now, one of the reasons we can reach this amount of damage is in great part due to being able to take advantage of some of the most effective damage multiplier mechanics in the game, including Elemental Overload for 40% more damage, Aspect of Carnage for another 40%, Point Blank for a very powerful increase too, depending on how far the projectiles travel of course, not to mention being able to effectively use Elemental Focus and Concentrated Effect for Molten Strike with no downsides. And if you eventually get Soft's Blood and start covering the enemies in ass, that's another 20% more multiplier. So as you can see, we stack multiplier on multiplier on multiplier and so forth, and that is, well, obviously incredibly effective. And keep in mind that the damage tooltip you see in Path of Building for the magma balls, that is for one ball alone. In my setup, for instance, I have 12 balls. Yes, I'm very fertile. And about 7 or 8 attacks per second. I've had multiple variants of the skill tree this time, and I think I've settled on this one here. Being a former hardcore player, I tend to pick up a lot of life, probably a little too much considering I'm now in softcore. But if you prefer, you can easily remove 4, maybe 5 points of life and spend it on more damage. In that case, I would probably recommend the Berserker cluster for that sweet attack speed. Also, with this type of build, you'll want to get as much strength as to scale the fire damage from the Lead Sprinkler, but of course without sacrificing unnecessary points. While this build is about strength, you're not going balls to the wall and trying to get everything you can. You can get upwards of 1700-1800 strength if you really squeeze the lemon, so to speak. But it's not more efficient than picking the right nodes and scaling the damage via both a decently high strength amount and optimal skill nodes. Besides that, you'll want to grab efficient life regen nodes to help with the rage degen and elemental damage scaling nodes. Physical scaling is very inefficient and thus not very desirable. We get mana and life leech from the nodes near the duelist, This and the life gain on hit from our gear provides some excellent life and mana sustain. And if you find yourself lacking resistances while progressing, feel free to pick up Sentinel and or Diamond Skin, but spec out of them later once your gear can cover the requirements. And now, one very important thing to mention here, guys, is that until you can get your Lyco shield, then I suggest speccing into Resolute Technique to cover your accuracy needs. Once you get the Lyco shield, you can spec out of Resolute Technique and then grab Elemental Overload, which won't work while using Resolute Technique, as you cannot crit and thus not proc the effect. And that's partly why the Lyco shield is so amazing too. It covers your accuracy completely and then suddenly allows you to use a 40% increased damage multiplier. Since I've already covered the unique items and how they work in the forum guide, I won't spend more time on it here. You can find leveling tips, skill trees, path of building info, alternative chieftain version and a budget version via the forum guide. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them below. Visit me on discord.gg/lifting or twitch.tv/lifting_. I also have a newly set up Patreon page if you feel like buying me a cup of coffee. If you like what you saw, remember to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and bros,
do you even nerd?